So, how do we know how advanced a piece of technology is? So, is an iPhone advanced? Is a shovel advanced? Is a house advanced? Is a car advanced? I think when deciphering, trying to decrypt the Egyptian pyramid mystery, this question of how advanced a piece of technology is one that keeps coming up, and that one that there really isn't an answer for. And so, in order to properly reverse engineer how the pyramids were built, we need to have some sort of way for determining how advanced a piece of technology is, so we can decide whether or not to be impressed by it. So, how can we determine how advanced a piece of technology is? So, one way to approach this would be from the perspective of an inventor. And so an inventor trying to invent a piece of technology, what is it that they would need in order to create that invention? So, for example, a boat. If I'm an inventor and I want to invent a boat, like, how would that even happen for me? So like with the process of invention, the first thing you need to do is you need to observe something happening. So with a boat, you would observe that trees, for example, can float in the water. Then once you make the observation, then you make some connection with something else. So, like, okay, a log can float in the water, and hey, maybe I see a bird land on the log, and well, if a bird can land on the log and the log floats, well, why can't I be on the log and I can float? And so you sort of have to make this little leap based on this observation, and that's how an invention is created. So, we can use this to help us to be able to rank how advanced a piece of technology is. So, with a boat, you have to say, so what is the observation that you have to make to invent a boat? You have to observe that something floats. So, me as a human, what resources would I need to be able to make that observation? So, well, for one, I need to have access to water. Water where there would be trees nearby that could fall into the water and float. And so those would be the resources I need to make the observation, and then you'd have the resources that you need to actually build the boat itself. So for that, I would need access to a tree. I would need some tool or some technique to carve it open and shape it in the right way that it could float and I could get in it, or you'd do like a raft design. So there's of course a bunch of different boat designs, but but this is where we start. In how do we say how advanced a piece of technology is? We have to think about what is the observation that you need to make, what are the resources you need to even make that observation in the first place, and then once you've made that observation, what are the resources that you need to be able to then execute and build the thing you've invented. And so, for example, if we take the idea of a boat, and we look back in history, we see that boats are come up fairly often, and this makes sense because the resources that you need to create a boat are fairly available. There's trees, lots of places over the planet. There's rivers, where there's trees going next to the river where they have a chance to fall in. Same with the ocean, lakes and whatnot. People need water to survive, so they're going to tend to go towards water. So making that observation is a fairly easy thing. And so in a lot of cultures, we can look back and we expect to see boats. But then if you take something like an airplane, historically we see there's different attempts at creating machines for flight, but it takes a while until there's the successful one with the Wright brothers. So with an airplane, we have to think, okay, so what's the observation you need to make to make an airplane, and that's that birds can fly. But that's not enough to be able to build an airplane. You also need to. You don't need to just observe the birds fly. You need to understand how they fly and why they fly, and you need to be able to understand the mechanics of a wing and how air flows over the wing to create lift and whatnot. And so with an airplane, I think we can say an airplane is more advanced than a boat, because in order to create the airplane, so the resources that you need is, you don't just need the again, to observe a bird fly, you need this information, you need these resources of this little bit of information about how a wing works. And in order to get this piece of information for how a wing works, someone has to spend the time collecting that, thinking about that. And so this is another important thing in trying to rank these technologies, is sort of like the historical knowledge that you would need to build a certain invention. So with the airplane, you not only need this bit of information that someone has to build up, you also need the material science. So you need the rigid, lightweight materials to make the bones of your bird, and you need the lightweight feather material for the to go on your bones. So so then when you're thinking about, okay, well, if looking back, this is why we don't see airplanes until very recently, because having these resources line up, it could be quite a challenge. So with this time aspect, it's another important thing for ranking these things. So so thinking about like clothing, for example, how advanced is the technology of clothing? So so like another metric we can use for how advanced a piece of technology is how long it takes to develop and whatnot. So if you imagine, if you were to go into the woods or go into the jungle as a child and then come out as an adult, would you be able to create this technology if you had nothing on you whatsoever? And so this is sort of like our basic level of like level 0 sort of advanced technology. So things that you could go in a single lifetime and create. So things like leather clothing, knives made out of volcanic glass, things like this. We can rank them as being primitive and whatnot, because you the observations you need to make can be made like almost anywhere on the globe, kind of thing. The time it takes, within a lifetime, you can create this technology, and so something like that, we can even put like a boat into that category, as because like in a single lifetime, it's conceivable that without knowing what a boat is, you could make the observations to then build a boat. So this is interesting, because this gives us a way that we could actually apply numbers to a piece of technology and then put it in a spreadsheet and say, objectively, this piece of technology is more advanced than this piece of technology, and this is why it is more advanced. And I think this is an important tool for assessing different mysteries from the past, like how the pyramids and stuff were built. So, one other detail in this, so I've been talking about boats. We also have an issue inside of a particular piece of technology, is like how advanced is the boat. And so, because like you can have a dugout canoe, which you make out of a single tree, or you could have a nuclear submarine, which you make out of all kinds of materials and is super highly advanced. And so how would you rank these amongst themselves in terms of how advanced they are? And so in that way, I think we just use the same kind of rubric, where what are the observations you need to make, what are the resources necessary to make it, and on that you can easily rank a dugout canoe as being less advanced than a nuclear submarine. But there's also a consideration of what exactly you're comparing. Are you just comparing the objects themselves, or the fact that it's a boat versus a boat? So like the nuclear submarine has like a nuclear power generator, it has a water treatment facility, it has weapons, it has all these other things which aren't necessarily needed for a boat. So does that count towards how advanced that boat is? Or would we just say that the submarine, purely from a boat perspective, because that's what the technology we're comparing, definitely would be more advanced, but only because it can dive, not because it has a nuclear power station on it, or because it has a life support system on it. And so this is also an interesting thing to consider when comparing technologies, to try to figure out how advanced they are. So now we have a way to rank how advanced a piece of technology is, but how does this help us when we don't know what the technology is itself? So when we're looking at a problem like the pyramids, well, we don't know what the piece of technology is, so how can we say how advanced it is? And so this is where reverse engineering comes into play. And so how we can approach this problem is using the skills of reverse engineering to look at a problem in building the pyramids. For example, say how the blocks are cut, and look at, well, what are all of the possible inventions I can make to cut a block, and in inventing all of the possible ways to cut a block, we can then use our rubric for ranking advanced technology to then rank all of these possible ways to cut a block. And so once we have ranked how advanced these individual techniques for cutting a block are, we can then look at how probable it is that they would have had this piece of technology, because we can look at the different resources they had, the different observations that they would have been able to make. And so that's the next step. So now we have this rubric for ranking how advanced a piece of technology is. We can then use that to assess this problem and figure out how advanced the technology really would be to create something like the pyramids. And in order to do that, we need to understand reverse engineering. So that would be what will be coming up next.